Hey, morning. Here we are. I have a new camera, big, light, more sharper, more focused, but that's not what you care about. Uh, Another Ed puzzle. We're going to do form in art today. You've been chewing away at it a little bit, but I'm going to dig a little bit more into what art is actually and how you sort of look at it as a physical object. Sounds unimportant, but it's really half the story when we talk about communication. You remember, good communication is a marriage of form and content. That little list of happies that I drew out for you, most of you picked page 2. It communicated happy better. And so we could go on and on with different artworks. What colors should we have chosen? What form of art should have been a sculpture, painting, whatever. So you know the arts, visual, performing, literary. You know communication has two forms, form and content, two aspects. You found out a little bit about artists and the creative process. You've even looked at genre and style to categorize art that you've seen. What's the subject matter? Is it a portrait or a landscape? And style was, what relation does it have to how we see reality? Is it realistically done or abstract? By the way, everyone uses that term still too loosely. Abstract is related to how we see. You can still recognize the subject matter. Non-objective is when, or non-representational is when you can't recognize it. It doesn't represent anything. It just is. Sort of like symphonic music or instrumental music. It doesn't represent rain falling or anything like that. Okay. Visual elements of art. Here's the analogy which students have trouble with. You know language, right? And you know the sentences, even the sentence that I'm speaking to you through, can be broken down into parts of speech. Subject, verb, noun, adjective, adverb, article. I'm sure there's a lot more. And together, these things make for communication. Music has building blocks. It's sound and the duration of the sound. Even the sound itself has pitch, loudness, attack. How, does it come in like this or really sharp? And its timbre is the quality of the sound, the overtones that it carries. So any art form can be broken down into simple elements, given meaning, and then rearranged and given other meanings. Okay, so let's look at some pictures and we'll talk about what these things are: line, shape, form, value, color, texture, and pattern. An example so that you can recognize them in an artwork. This is a print, Jean Amato, and you see here lines. This is an example line, and here I go. Lines, they have to have a drawn feeling to them. They're not like edges, like on those circles, or edges of the building. Lines are have a drawn feel. That's the one thing. So these trees, or the branches in the trees, really feel drawn. And they're going to vary in their straightness and their thickness and whatever, okay? Shape or form. So, whoops, there's line again, okay? More expressive line, varying in darkness and straightness, I guess you might say. That's done by a student. Form is three-dimensional. Shape is two-dimensional, okay? And you have positive shapes and negative shapes. Here, we're going to talk positive shapes, 3 circles, sort of irregular, okay? Here, there's positive forms. This is Mother and Child by Isamu Noguchi. And there's also negative spaces in there. The little holes, my pointer doesn't work at this magnification. Oh, there it is. These are in here. Those are the negative spaces. Okay, we wouldn't really have negative spaces here. Perhaps around here, but it's so amorphous, it's hard to really identify. But anyways, lines, very straight, various thicknesses, varying in their straightness and pressure here. Shapes, forms, both positive and negative. Okay? This is a painting. It's in color, but we want to talk about value here. Lights and darks. This is by Andrew Wyeth. It could very well have been done in black and white. The color does not add much to it. So we look at this and say, there's a lot of value in this picture, a lot of dark light changes. Okay? Value does not mean what it's worth on the stock market. Here's value also. Lights and darks are really important to this picture. Also shapes, the guys standing here, and lines, all these ropes and things going across. But you first look at that and say, ooh, look at the values, the light to dark. Here, I bet you just said, oh, that's colorful. It is. This is a painting by Henri Matisse. Everyone hates it. I think it's horrible, but it's very colorful. We can also look at this and talk about shapes. There's a lot of shapes in here, and patterns, those ferns across the back and the grid back here, the sort of pattern in the end of the sofa here, okay? Here's color also. Wayne Thiebaud. You look at this and say, ooh, he really enjoyed painting those things and painting those things in color. You could also look at this and talk about pattern, because it's sort of regular, even though it doesn't look like a clothing pattern. Here, texture. This is another art element. Texture is really important to this painting, again by Andrew Wyeth. Pretty famous painting, by the way. The texture of the dry grass here, which he had a special technique for called dry brush, very much like the scumbling, which I've been teaching the painting students. Pattern. This is from the Alhambra. It's a mosaic. Yes, it looks bewildering at first, but actually there is some regularity to it. I figured it out at some point. I think it goes along the diagonal here. The blue streak, the ochre streak, I don't know if that's black or dark blue, dark green. This also, way back to Wayne Thiebaud, you could speak of as pattern. Okay, on that? Won't get to that yet. So let's look again at this concept, some terms. Visual elements of art, the means by which an artist renders is subject. So for instance, those pies, those were shapes, little pie shapes, and colors. Texture, Andrew Wyeth's field there was, he did his landscape with a lot of texture in it. That was necessary. The tree drawings used line. You couldn't do it any other way than to draw it in line. And these are you could pick out any artwork at all and break it down into these elements. Just like you could take any sentence and break it down into noun, verb, adjective, adverb. Okay, so let me pause here. I'm going to give you, I think, 6 pictures, and you have to identify what's the sort of primary art element at work. What art element is really necessary to get across the image of that artwork? Okay, so I'll pause. Let's hope that's long enough. Okay. So you've got all these elements, these lines and colors and shapes, but we will compose them in a certain way. And even unconsciously in children, make up compositional principles as they work. They want to put a lot of variety into something or make it symmetrical for a certain feel. So you sort of have to believe artists do this, whether they're aware of it or not. Principles, the principles by which an artist organizes the elements of his artwork into, and this is my definition of a good artwork, rich, unified, balanced whole, or a good composition. I could do a whole Edpuzzle on that at your request, but let me just give you the analogy here, like literary devices. So, as I've been told, maybe some of the younger students have not yet studied what literary devices are in literature. They're the means by which you break up a large text in order to give it some organization and even to help the meaning run along. You know of chapters already in books. In plays, there's scenes. In poems, there's stanzas. There's also foreshadowing, where you might, in the beginning of a book, it might give a little sort of vignette, a little scene which gives the meaning of the whole in a little kernel, and then that'll be played out later or repeated later. The same scene might be repeated later or 3 times. Parallelism, when there's sort of a recurring thing all the way through. Even in a line of poetry, you have this thing called rhyming, which is a thing to help you remember, certainly, but it helps you move through the poem easily and ends up being sort of like a vehicle for the meaning. And there's couplets, and every 3 lines it rhymes, et cetera, et cetera. Sort of structural things that help you move through a text or a poem or a book or a novel. Sort of like helps you know where you are, helps to convey the meaning. So here we are with visual art, and we've got symmetry, asymmetry, variety, repetition of elements, rhythm, contrasts, very common, proportion, and scale. The important thing in these is their effect on the viewer. Why would someone use symmetry and not asymmetry? Okay, so we might, here's our state capitol here. Let me get it larger. Whoops. Wrong button, F5. Come on. There we are, okay. The elements here are little rectangles and little arches and little roofs and towers and flagpoles and whatever, but they are arranged symmetrically. Why do that? You see it for banks, state houses, schools, old-time schools, everything's symmetrical. It's in order to give a feeling of peace and order so that you're going to trust that building or that institution is going to be there forever. It's very Greek and Roman. It's classical, as we would say. And so symmetry lends formality and peace and, sort of a bit of eternity to a composition. But you don't always want that. Sometimes you want something cool and interesting. What happened to my asymmetry? Oh, this also is symmetrical. It's a mask, an Alaskan mask from, I don't know when it was designed, but certainly built within the last 100 years. And it sort of has, it's bilaterally symmetrical, so it looks like a person and an animal. But here's something asymmetrical. You cannot divided down the middle. There's no mirror image going on. And that's done to be interesting, to more dynamic. These things actually moved. It's Alexander Calder's mobile. They will move with the air, okay? And instead of hanging, he's placed this on a table or a pedestal called a stable for him, okay? So while symmetry lended formality to a composition, asymmetry makes it informal, more dynamic, more interesting, okay? Variety, I'm not sure why I put here. Why did I put that there? Yeah, I'm not sure why he's there. Sorry about that. But variety, here you've got Van Gogh giving us a variety of lines. And this makes for a very interesting, it lends richness. Variety is the spice of life. It's not too crazy variety because everything's in black or gray. And so it makes it a very rich drawing, interesting to look at. Okay, everyone likes variety. Too much variety. Here it is. This is from California. It was an interior design style from the 1980s, just to throw everything you could into it. I hate it. But the Cheesecake Factory, those restaurants, are done along the same lines. There's a whole variety of architectural styles in there. Not my cup of tea. Repetition helps to control too much variety. So not much was repeated here to give it a sense of unity. But here, students have talked about the repeated globe shape or this globular shape as if it were made of claymation. Everything has this roundness to it, which tends or helps to give unity to the picture. You know, either micro globs like in the trees or even just the land itself he's made into big round shapes. Okay. This apparently falling apart building, this is a really horrible piece of architecture. And here it is, Center for Brain Health. Is that like a mixture of form and content? Doesn't make any sense. But you see, Frank Gehry is the architect. He's repeating these rectangular windows everywhere in order to help give it unity. Yeah, it might be unified, but it's still horrible. Don't I have humble opinions here? Okay, another principle of composition is rhythm. And rhythm is the regular repetition of some element. It might be a shape, it might be a color, but it's regular and you can even guess where the next thing would be. So it's a little more complex than simple repetition. Okay, we saw repetition of circular shapes or globular shapes and repetition of rectangular shapes, but here's something genuinely rhythmic. This curve that the guy is doing with his graffiti, and you also have the triangles behind them and the mini triangles too. So there's a real left to right movement here, very rhythmic. You can sort of imagine him to continue to add syllables and write there, whatever it says. A little prize to whoever could translate that. This also is rhythmic, and what that does, here's the rhythm, the little posts. You can see here, it helps to move your eye through an artwork. Here, we were able to move left to right because of the rhythm. Here, we're able to move from the foreground to the background because of the rhythm. This is Grant Wood. In fact, this also is Grant Wood. And you know what else is Grant Wood? American Gothic, which has that man and his wife with the pitchforks standing in front of the farm buildings. An American painter, 1930s. good guy, Iowa. Okay, so you got rhythm here. Contrast is a principle of art which we're always using. If you want to make your point, you contrast it with something else, light or dark, or verbally, we're always contrasting this sort of thing. Here's a photograph by Henri Cartier-Bresson, and you know the black and white drama here going on. So contrast of values here adds interest, of course, and also drama, and can clarify what your focal point is, also help to lead your eye around. But we're talking here contrast of values, lights and darks. You might also talk line to shape is a cool contrast. Just look at this big black circle here and this thin line, triangular line. It's a nice, and then this big white shape. A lot of nice stuff, compositionally speaking, in this picture. The light that's coming down here in the background. Here is contrast. This is a student's work. Contrast of color between cool colors, the purples, and the warm colors, the salmon and the gold. And it creates a lot of drama. And she has framed this mountaintop with these warm colors. This is the project Twisted Color, by the way, for the Painting 2 classes are going to be doing it. The last two principles are scale and proportion. So proportion is the real proportions of the artwork. Here is a female torso, totally stretched out and string beamed, which has a it's part of the meaning of it, how elegant women are, or something like this, or how elegant this woman is. The arms are cut off because he's imitating the Greek sculptures that lost their arms through time. The sculptures, the arms fell off through battles and whatnot, but he happened to like just the armless Greek sculptures. Scale is the scale to us. So here's a sculpture by Alexander Calder, Flamingo. It's in Chicago, and you could see its large scale is part of the story of the artwork. If that was sitting on your desk, someone would say, how cute. But here it's how cool. There's something like this in Hartford. I saw it when I was your age and have not seen it since. I haven't been to Hartford in many years. But anyways, he's a good artist, American artist. Alexander Calder, he was the guy with the mobile at the beginning that I showed you. Okay, so back to our list. We compose things according to ideas, or according to rules that we make up, whether we're aware of it or not. These are them, and what's important is maybe not the list as much as what they do. Asymmetry makes for informal. Repetition helps to unify something. Rhythm helps to move our eyes through an artwork. Contrast can clarify the focal point, where we're supposed to look, adds interest and drama, really. Proportion also adds drama, and so can the scale. Okay, so here again, I'm going to do a bunch of pictures, 6 pictures, and I want you to identify what's the principle, the main principle of composition being used, which is most important to the artwork. Many of these, by the way, have 2 possible answers, so don't worry too much if you're struck between 2. I will pause. Okay, so just a final thing. There's going to be two questions. Could a single artwork contain all the elements of art? Can you imagine an artwork that had in it line, shape, value, color, texture, pattern, and form? And the second question, could a single artwork contain all these principles of design? Every one, symmetry and asymmetry at the same time, variety, repetition, rhythm, contrast, proportion. Artworks don't normally have all these things, but could they theoretically? Okay, and I'll leave time for that. And then thank you for viewing.